Greetings, this is Matt Field, your unaffiliated write-in candidate for governor of the state of Utah, encouraging you to ditch your political party and say no to the party animals. Again, this is a way by which I want to share various thoughts concerning the governing of our state, and again encourage you to read my proposal or listen to it. Again, it's entirely free. You can get it at govmat.org, where you can download the audio or the text file, or you can even, I have a link in there for Rumble that you can click on that will allow you to listen to it streaming. So I've tried to provide as many possible outlets whereby that you can do that. I'm having it translated into Spanish, and it's going to be read in Spanish, so you're going to have a text and audio file in Spanish. So hopefully that is beneficial to some of the voters out there. I know that there's roughly 30% of the population in the state of Utah speak Spanish. So again, the idea is to get the message out that we need to focus on morality over monarchy, and we need to root out corruption. Something that I don't think really I shouldn't say it all, but there aren't very many people that are seeking to do this. The majority of politicians are trying to stay in power. Many, I don't know about all of them, but a good chunk of those in the major party have been in politics for a good long while. And, they don't really represent the people as much as perhaps they believe that they do. Anyway, so let's move on. I wanted to talk about a handful of things today. My first priority is to reinforce liberty, and I talked about that in previous episodes. But this is a little bit of an episode on kind of bits and pieces of one, definitely my priority two, which is right to life and the protection thereof, and then also kind of going down to into my third priority, which is protecting our children. And there's many aspects that are taking place right now. I think one of the things that we have to focus on is making sure that we are functioning more as a small country than we are a state, the typical idea of a state. Because how often do we look to Washington to say, hey, fix this, fix that? These are only things the federal government can do, when in all reality, the only reason the federal government is the only one doing it is because that's the way they've kind of set it up. Not that it's illegal for a state to do some of the things that the country as a whole does, but that it's just not done that way. And perhaps the political class would frown upon it. But the idea is to make our lives better, right? And so the way that we can do that is by really exercising the 10th Amendment, which says the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So these rights, the things that the federal government doesn't have purview over, can fall to the state, right? And this is in reference to the Constitution, specifically to the Constitution. I hear very often that we need to be law-abiding citizens. Then we should be law-abiding citizens, right? We don't respond to the mob, we respond to what the law actually is. And how frequently do we see the response more to the mob and popularity than we do to the actual laws of the land, particularly the Constitution? And I know there's many people out there that are staunch constitutionalists, and this is something that weighs a lot on their mind, and they believe is being neglected here in the United States and in our state for sure. And I agree with you, and that's why we have to make some changes. So before I dive into the whole thing, I wanted to put a little idea out there, and I'd love for you to comment in the comment section and share, do the whole thing. But here's the question: are your politics, your political beliefs, contingent upon probability? Okay? Now, what do I mean by that? Many of you don't know me, of course, and many of you probably are either a member of the Republican Party or of the Democrat Party. And so the question is since we're so used to seeing a Republican and a Democrat going up in the general election, well, there are other parties, of course, But because we're so used to seeing that happen in one or the other prevailing, and obviously in Utah primarily the Republican, do we make our choice based upon the probability of winning? This would mean that if you are basing your decision upon the probability of winning, that your beliefs are spongy, right? They're malleable. They don't have an actual true north. Because if you're just voting for your party because you think that's the best thing to do, then you're not fully reviewing all the options ahead of you. I've had a lot of people ask me, well, how on earth are you going to get enough people? How are you getting enough, enough attention in order to be elected, particularly as a write-in vote? And again, if you're wondering why I'm doing a write-in vote, I suggest you read my book, listen to it, or listen to previous episodes. So if our beliefs are malleable and they aren't actual bedrocks, then our main concern will be winning. And if we're always just trying to win, then we're always going to be electing Democrats and Republicans. And Democrats and Republicans have created the current situation we're in right now. What makes you think, in all reality, that they're going to actually make the change? And my answer is, emphatically, they won't. They won't make the change. It'll be the same sort of rhetoric. It'll be the same sort of action. It'll be the same big government on either side of the spectrum. Democrats and Republicans have, as George Washington said, they have usurped the power of the people. And they are using the party to control the people for their own gain and for their own ends. And so I encourage you not to lay your political beliefs on the contingent of probability, but have beliefs that are solid, that will stand the test of time, and that won't prevent you from voting for the person that is best for the job. Okay, so let's move into some of this. I've got a little, this kind of refers back to, in my second priority, references entirely back to the Second Amendment, honestly, is that we have the right to bear arms. The part that almost no one ever talks about, and I don't know why, but we have another right within that amendment that says we have the right to a well-armed and well-regulated militia. And again, this isn't used. In fact, if you were to organize something in your neighborhood that would respond to riots, that would respond to, whatever, then most likely you'd get arrested under some conspiracy charge or, whatever. But that's actually our right. We have the right to assemble a well-armed and well-regulated militia. And in my proposal, I talk specifically about this. And I want to share a little clip here from a guy who discusses what they call the 21 foot, or it leads into some additional information, and I'm going to kind of expound upon that. But this is the clip kind of talking about our rights versus the rights of the government.
How come it's legal for the government to do this, but it's not legal for a citizen acting in self-defense? For a police officer, is something that is referred to as the tool or drill or 21-foot rule. As if I'm standing 21 feet from a potential threat, and let's say he has an edge weapon or a club, if he rushes me, by the time I can get my gun out and fire a shot, he will have stabbed me about the same time. It means it's a tie. This is why police officers are trained that people with clubs and knives are a danger to them at greater than 20 feet. The prosecution mindset typically is the farther someone is away from you, the less threatened you should be. So therefore, if someone's 10 feet away, you shouldn't have fired your gun in self-defense. Now, my theory is, if it's justifiable for a police officer to shoot a threat at 20, 21 feet, it is just as justifiable for your client acting in self-defense to do the same thing.
So that's obviously referring to, a defense in court. But it brings up a very interesting point in that the government who has assembled a police force and a military, by the way, they have additional rights that the citizen doesn't have. Now, make sense of that one for me. As soon as you become a member of the civil service, or you become an elected official, or whatever it may be, somehow you are able to garnish more rights than that of the citizen, which is completely wrong. Okay, and when it comes to this item, my proposal for having neighborhood militias, basically it's allowing the same rights that the police have to the citizen. Basically saying that, hey, a police officer, and it is currently legal in the state of Utah, that's one thing that's good. They can open carry, they can conceal carry, they can have those different resources to their, but the problem comes is that we have no organization. So, and I've heard people say, oh, this is going to cause some serious problems if you have people actually forming militias in their neighborhood. No, the intent is to have organization for protection. Okay, so if you've got a BLM riot going through your neighborhood, and you've got one person that walks out onto your front porch with a gun, or with his gun or something like that, there's lack of organization. There might be one person on one side of the street, another person on the other side of the street holding a gun against the protesters that might be on the same side, right? So if the one owner is facing north, the other one's facing south, the people are in the middle, they could actually have some friendly fire that takes place there. People have the right to protect their lives, protect their property, but without a militia, without actually having some sense of organization there is not really an ability to fully protect yourself and your family. At some point, the mob will overwhelm you. Okay, you might be able to fire off a couple shots, that might scare them off. They come back again, they come back. You don't know, and we don't know. Unfortunately, internationally and federally, more and more people are falling under massive scrutiny for taking the initiative to protect themselves. And this can't happen in Utah. We have to have provisions that allow people to organize themselves, and the government needs to function as a support for that system. So the state should have a state-supported but citizen-led militia. So what I propose in the book is that essentially we are going to have training you would have from the state once a year, and then hopefully quarterly by your local law enforcement. Think of what that would do to crime. Okay? You put up a sign on the outside of your neighborhood that says regulated by the Fairfield Estate Militia, regulated by the Fairfield Estate Militia. And so people that come in that might want to do some nefarious activity, they see that and say, oh, these guys are already set up. If I go in there, instantly people are going to know who they contact, and there's going to be basically an instant chain of command that is executed, and the cops are going to be contacted. So for me to go into this neighborhood, I essentially risk my life. This would increase the familiarity and the action between the citizen and the police force exponentially. If something happens, we would have a system in place where the team leader or however that system ends up being put together, they contact the cops, or basically anyone would contact cops, right? But then you would be able to put an entire team into action that's already there. Okay? This is an amazing feature. And I encourage in this plan that I provided, I encourage non-lethal types of defense, things like bean bags or pepper spray, and there's lots of different weapons that have these types of options. They're less lethal, but are still incredibly effective. Of course, there'll still be some need for lethal for sure, but the purpose is more to protect and deter rather than obviously attack. We don't want to go so much on the offense as we do just want to remain on the defense. And so with a system like this in place, it's going to ensure the safety of not just one family and a well-armed family in their house, but an entire neighborhood. And if everyone in the state is broken up into multiple militias throughout the entire state, now we literally have a force to be reckoned with. And any criminal that wants to commit crime, violent, whatever it is, they're going to be met not just with the first wave, but then they'll be met with a second wave when the cops come in. So I think it's an incredibly well-written amendment, the Second Amendment, but for some reason the attack has been more so on the individual and their ability to carry a gun versus the ability to organize and protect. And that organization is critical if we plan to actually be able to do what we need to do. So, and this kind of leads into a little bit more. I wanted to share this next clip with you, discussing kind of the issues that are taking place at the border. Not kind of the issues, definitely the issues that are taking place at the border, and have been exponential in the last few years since the Biden administration has taken over. So I want you to take a listen to this, and then I'm going to kind of provide some commentary on how this affects my current plan and a couple other things. So here we go.
Probably not the right thing to say, but I was angry. Let me tell you why you're angry, because you or no one else in this room has seen what I've seen in my 34 years. You didn't stay in the back of a tractor trailer shot my 19 dead aliens that suffocated to death because the smuggler didn't care, including a 5-year-old boy. What do you think his last 30 minutes were like? I was there. I seen it, I smelled it, I saw it. I had a 5-year-old boy at the time, and it changed me for the rest of my life. I've seen people who couldn't pay their smuggling fees got stabbed in the face 22 times. 31% of the women are being raped crossing this border. Children are dying. Cartels are getting rich. Why am I angry? Because you haven't done anything to fix it. Nothing. We've been up here for 2 years trying to close the 3 loopholes that Collins said needs to be closed, and you haven't taken one action. But if there's a policy or initiative that's going to cause an illegal alien to be arrested or be detained or be removed, we're going to have a hearing within days. Within days. But I'm still waiting on a hearing on sanctuary cities because these people's lives have been changed forever.
You know that recycling is fake.
So, sorry, I bled into another video there, but it provides a very interesting aspect. That was the one of the directors of border security, and he was basically just discussing the various things that were taking place at the border. This is a recent clip. This was in the last week or so, and it's horrifying down there. It's horrifying. He mentioned that 31% of the women that are crossing the border right now are being raped. Anyone that has thought that they have mixed feelings regarding the border, or they are in favor of keeping the border open, they are blind. They are completely and entirely blind to a very small, a very, very acute point of view, because the idea that people are actually coming over here to start a better life, now that could definitely be true. I'm not saying that isn't the case, but the way in which it's taking place is horrifying. I have a friend that I was speaking to just the other day, and he said he had some friends that crossed the border illegally. And he said, you have two choices. They told me, this is what they told my friend. Said, you have two choices. You can either carry a pack of drugs, okay, or you can pay them. And that's what this guy was talking about. He said those that weren't paying their cartel fees, this is the cartel. The cartel basically is running our southern border. The cartel, they will go and kill you. They'll enforce their law, and they'll prevent you from doing what you want to do unless you work for them. And anyway, the story goes on. He says that they carry these big packs, and they make it across the border. And as they arrive, there's a cop waiting for them. And he takes the bags, and he asks if everyone's good, and then he leaves. And now, so we don't know what happened with that cop. We don't know if the cop was just there to confiscate the drugs or what the case was. My friend implies that the drugs were taken by the police officer because, he wants the nefarious activity to continue, and somehow he was bought off by the cartel or something like that. I can't confirm that, obviously, but I do believe him in that and obviously it's confirmed with this clip from this director, is that the only way that you're crossing the border is if you are to endure some serious pain. And one of them is, participating in crime. The other is potentially, paying out your life savings in order to do it. The other is if you don't, you get killed. Others, they pay and they get smuggled in a tractor trailer, and then they don't care about the people afterwards. That's what he was talking at the beginning. And then they end up just dying in there because they're unable to escape. These are horrific conditions, and they continue to exist at the border. And what's happening is that since the cartel is running it, and the cartel is making loads and loads of money because of it, they are bringing more and more drugs across the border. Fentanyl is flowing across the border, supplied by the Chinese government. This is information that's easily verifiable. The Chinese are producing it in mass, and they're sending it over to Mexico in conjunction with the cartel to send it over the border. I can provide that reference if you'd like. But going on with this, basically the main point that I have is when I'm talking about protecting youth and children, our kids, 80% of them, according to a study by this is in my book, but according to the study by, I believe, the CDC, let me take a quick look here and see, just make sure I'm not blabbering off. Let's see. Oh, yes, right here. So the drugs portion that I'm talking about, there is the amount of drugs that are coming across the board. Yeah, 80% of our kids are trying illegal drugs prior to them graduating high school. Now, if that number doesn't rock you, I don't know what will. I had no idea. That it was that high. Now, it might be lower here in the state of Utah, but who knows, honestly, who knows? There's other things that should be lower, like pornography. The consumption of pornography in the state of Utah is astronomical compared to any other state, and you would think it would be the lowest. So you would think that drugs would be the lowest too, but I wasn't able to find the state data on that. But the United States as a whole, 80% of our kids are trying drugs before they leave. And these drugs are coming across the board. And this leads back to my point of exercising the 10th Amendment at its maximum. We have to start preventing drugs from coming into the state. And the way we do that is by finding the main ports of entry and guarding them up. And we literally would have to have, dogs, and we'd have police officers and everybody. They would be coming toward the border, and they'd be sniffed out. If they've got drugs, they would obviously be, at minimum, turned away. The drugs would be confiscated, and hopefully that would eliminate. I think, though, there'll always be somebody able to sneak some drugs across the border, there would be a massive decrease in that happening. And maybe eventually people would stop going to main ports of entry. And in my proposal, I say, well, if we begin to see an uptick on that process, then maybe it's time to put a fence around the entire state to help prevent that. The objective here is to prevent this illicit activity, these drugs, from making it into Utah. Okay? And this is a pet peeve. I mean, it's a mass. The way in which we've actually treated our kids is atrocious. We've abused them. We've confused them. We've done all these things, and all in the name of equality or some good of this or that. And it's frustrating. It's extremely frustrating that people can't see the ramifications of their actions when they allow this sort of thing. When people believe they're being nice, but in all reality, they're affecting our children in massive ways. And I mean that in the sense that, hey, we should let the people come to Utah. Let them come. It's okay. It's okay. What they don't realize is the amount of drugs that they're bringing. And not to mention, if you've read recent reports, it's not just like you're having a bunch of Mexicans coming across the border or, Central Americans coming across the border. You're having people from Iraq and from Pakistan and from Middle Eastern countries and just all over the place, third world countries all over the place, going to Mexico and then crossing the border. And if you don't believe that, go look it up, because that's been reported multiple times. Bobby Kennedy's mentioned it. Donald Trump has mentioned it. And that this same officer in the same interview, he mentions it, the one that I played earlier. So these are things that have to be addressed. They have to be actively taken care of. We can't wait for the federal government to take action. The state of Utah has to take action, and they have to start regulating their own border to ensure that we don't have drugs coming in, and particularly criminals coming into our state to take advantage of its bounty, essentially. So I wanted to, and that, again, I encourage you to read the entire thing in context. It's an extensive document, and if you take the time, I have multiple references in every single one of these supporting the actions that I want to take. And again, you can download that at govmat.org, or you can again, the text or the audio. You can download those and listen to it. And again, there's the Rumble link in the description there that you can listen to it streaming if you don't want to download it. So again, I've provided many ways in which to do that. So please do that. Please learn on your actual options for governor of the state, and let's really turn some things around. And true to form, I like to, Utah is the most religious state in the union, and I do like to take a little bit of time to do a little tribute to that. I found this clip. I thought it's funny, but it's also very interesting, and I'll play that for you now.
You ever heard the quote from Richard Nixon's former special counsel, Charles Colson? He ended up converting to Christianity later on in life, and he has a really funny quote where he says, "I know the resurrection is a fact, and Watergate proved it to me, because 12 men testified that they had seen Jesus raised from the dead. Then they proclaimed that truth for 40 years, never once denying it. Every one of them was beaten, tortured, stoned, and put in prison. They would not have endured it if it weren't true. Watergate embroiled 12 of the most powerful men in the world, and they couldn't keep alive for 3 weeks. You're telling me 12 apostles could keep alive for 40 years? Absolutely impossible."
So I thought that was pretty funny, and it's so true. You know, when you look at Jesus Christ and his apostles, when you look at someone like Joseph Smith, when you look at many other people, they proclaim something over and over and over again because it's true and because it's the reality. A quote that my friend told me long ago when I was on my mission, he said, "It doesn't matter what people believe. The truth is the truth, and it will remain the truth regardless of what they say." And I've always taken that with me, and there's a great scripture that goes along with that. And if you're not familiar with Doctrine and Covenants, but Doctrine and Covenants 93:30, that's a great scripture that references directly back to this. But we need to recognize that there is a more powerful force at work here that can do some good if we're willing to follow along true and virtuous principles. And when we are able to choose morality to augment our lives and ensure its security in many ways, and to and not just our own security, but the security of others, then you begin to see how important it is, and you begin to see through the lies of many of the politicians and the media and others that push a lie for so long, and then they flip on it later on, right? You can probably think of, right off the top of my head, I think of the Russia hoax, that Donald Trump was involved in Russia, when they ran the Russia story the entire time. They never had a lick of evidence, and they were just trying to pull the wool over our eyes. And there's a million instances where people, once they've run into the truth and they can't deny it any longer, they either submit or they try and run an audible or something like that. And we have to recognize the constant truth that's going to keep us in a good place for longest, and that's the only way to go. And I thank you for taking the time to listen. Please listen to my full proposal.